know about the book, The Founder's Dilemmas, I never read management books. I like to learn, but I don't like to be taught. And many management books say, you have to do this, you have to do this. If you do this, you will be successful. Now, I fly a lot, so I spend a lot of time on airports, and every time to spend my time on the airport, I go to a bookshop and I turn some pages in books. And when I looked at the first sentence of The Founder's Dilemmas, I read, "It's unfortunate but true. If entrepreneurship is a battle, most casualties stem from friendly fire or self-inflicted wounds." And I said, that's how I experienced it. This is so true. I need to buy this book. I need to read this book. And so during a flight from SFO to Amsterdam and from Amsterdam to Brussels and then taking the train, I've read this book. And it starts with 2 allegations. Allegation number 1 is, if you're an entrepreneur, you're rich. And if you're from Belgium, you know that there's a company called Omega Pharma. It has been sold for more than 3 billion, and the owner still owned half of the shares, so he now has more than 1.5 billion. And there have been demonstrations saying, hey, this can't be, that this guy is so rich, he should pay taxes and he should give his money to in the bottomless pit of Belgium. That's some things that were published in the newspapers. But Wasserman, the author of The Founder's Dilemmas, he said, that was in the late 90s, early 2000, he said, well, we know people like Mark Cooke or Larry Ellison who have made a lot of money, but if you look at, over a 10-year period, you see that entrepreneurs earn 35% less than that they could have earned if they were employees. If you would look at the first 10 years of Mark Cooke's life in business, you would see that he invested in his company and that he lost money, so he was going negative, and he promised his wife, I'm going to be debtless before I'm 50. And I don't know how old he is, but he reached that goal. But had he done a job as employee in those 10 years, he would have had made more. And if you look at the whole career of an entrepreneur, if you look at the average, you see that entrepreneurs as a class make only as much money as they could have had if they had been employees. In fact, they make less because they take a higher risk. So it's all about averages. We look at the exceptions and we forget about all the people who don't make money with being an entrepreneur. Second allegation is, you're an entrepreneur because you like to be in control. So Wasserman did a study. He investigated with men and women, with people in their 20s, in their 30s, in their 40s, and he asked them, in your career, what is important for you? And he didn't find that many differences between men and women or between generations. Sure, the older they got, there was a shift in their aspirations, in what was important in their career. But he saw a clear difference between the people who were entrepreneur and the people who were employee. Entrepreneurs, they said, we like power and influence. That's what keeps us going. Or we want autonomy. We want to be our own boss. Or we want to manage people. Whereas employees, they said, we want security. We want to be sure that we will still have a job in 5 years, in 10 years. We want recognition. We want somebody to pat on our back and say, good job. Or we want affiliation. I work for Coca-Cola. I work for I work for Google. So these are some differences between employees and entrepreneurs. But the allegation that being an entrepreneur equals control, well, he analyzed some startups and he saw that by the time ventures were 3 years old, 50% of the founders were no longer the CEO. So they gave up control in the first 3 years of their business. So that's the second myth that was busted. And he said, well, this is research from other people. And he talked with entrepreneurs and he saw that if entrepreneurs had to make decisions, they had different options. And they didn't always choose the option that would have made them the most money. So he said, why is this? What's going on here? And he said, I need to do some research. So he investigated with 10,000 companies between 2000 and 2009. So he followed these companies for 10 years. And he wrote this book saying there are three groups of major decisions that you have to make when you create a company. You have to decide about founders, you have to decide about hires, and you have to decide about investors. So founders, either you go solo. In my case with iText, I'm a couplepreneur because it's my wife and I who are the founders. But it's very important to look at the 3 R's. What are the relationships between the founders? What are the roles? What are the rewards? The same 3 R's, he discusses them regarding hires. And then investors, decisions you have to make. Are you going to bootstrap, to self-fund? Or are you going to go for external outside capital? And what are the sources of capital? So you had the friends, fools, families. So you had in the previous talk, you had these different categories. And then what are the terms? You have investor-friendly terms or founder-friendly terms. And do you accept the board of directors? So these are key decisions that have to be made when you create a company. And then there are, in chapter 10, he discusses successors. So if you're a founder and a CEO, maybe at some point you will be asked to leave and to have another CEO for your company. So what is the trigger of succession? And how open are you to succession as the founder? Maybe you say, hey, I founded this company, I'm the CEO, and I'm the CEO for life. And if I'm forced to leave, well, then I'm no longer working for this company. That's the desired role after succession. Then he discusses some other factors, like the preferred rate of startup. How fast do you want to grow? Can you afford to grow slowly? Or do you need to grow fast? Like Showpad, it's a company that received some venture capital a week ago, and they really need that venture capital because they are a sales tool, and there are a lot of players on that market. So if they don't move fast, they might lose that market. Capital intensity, that's not about capital in the sense of how much capital do you need. If you create software, you don't need that much capital. If you create hardware, maybe you have to build a plant, maybe you have to install machines. So that's a higher capital intensity. Core founders' capitals, that's not about money. That's about you're the founder, maybe you are a good business guy, but you don't have any technological knowledge. So you need a technical co-founder. Or you don't have any financial knowledge, so you need a CFO as co-founder. Maybe. And so Wasserman looks at these decisions and he draws a quadrant. If you end up to the left in the quadrant, you are underperforming regarding the financial goals. So you are not realizing the maximum financial result that you could have. If you're on the right, you have built your financial maximum, you have really created a lot of wealth. If you're in the lower half, you have little control over your company. And if you are in the upper half, you keep control over the company. And he says, well, when I study these 10,000 companies, I see that a lot of companies have consistently chosen for control decisions. In co-founders, they go solo. Or in Belgium, when you start a company and you are the only founder, you need to start an EBVBA. And that's not really interesting to start an EBVA, but if you want a BVBA, which is more interesting, then you need at least 2 founders. So what you will do is, I'll take my father as a co-founder, and he will never harass me about my business. I can do my thing, and he's just like a straw puppet. You will choose your founders from your immediate circle. You'll be the CEO, so from your immediate circle, that's the relationships. I once went on Sand Hill Road to a VC, and so I was there with my wife, and he asked, what's the relationship between you two? And we said, yeah, we're married. Oh, conversation stopped, because if your marriage goes bad, business will hurt. If there's a problem in business, your marriage will hurt. So I'm not investing in couples. So that was the advice of a VC. And co-founders, they will maintain the most equity. So I'm the owner, I'm the founder, I should have 100% of the equity. Hires, you look in your close personal network, and you'll keep control of key decisions. After reading the book, I realized that with iText, we've always gone for control decisions, because nobody else in the company was allowed to sign a document. So every document that was of importance, it had to come to me and I had to sign it. If you're successful, that becomes a burden. You hire less expensive juniors. That's in your hires. That's a typical control decision. Investors, you'll self-fund, and maybe you'll get some money from friends, fools, and family, but you'll resist investor-friendly terms, and you'll avoid an official board. Back in the old days, I said, hey, it's my company. I don't need a board deciding for me. I've changed over the time, and now we have a board, and now I say, no, I have a board that can make decisions, and it's not only on my shoulders that the responsibility is resting. And control decisions, most of the time, Wasserman noticed that founder CEOs resisted to give up their CEO position. They only left if they were forced, if things went bad with the company. And so that's what he discusses in chapter 10. Other factors that are an immediate result of going for control decisions is that you will have gradual to moderate growth. With iText, we kind of grew to, we are a company between $5 to $10 million revenue a year. We're not $1 billion company. And that's a result of having chosen for control decisions. So low capital intensity. There are companies in Belgium. I know a company owner, he says, well, I try to keep my revenue under 1 million euro because if I make more than 1 million euro, I can't manage my company. So that's maybe a personal opinion of that entrepreneur. And other factors that allow you to take control decisions, if you can build a startup without help, then you can afford taking control decisions. But if you don't know how to run a business, if you're not a technical guy or not a business guy, if you're missing some of these core capitals, control decisions will be more difficult. But the result of control decisions is the most likely outcome. You'll maintain control, but you'll build less value. And in Wasserman's book, you're a king. You're in that quadrant. You're the king of your company, but you're happy with the money you make. And Wasserman, one of the things I like about the book, he doesn't judge. He doesn't say you have to take control decisions, you have to take wealth decisions. In my mother tongue, they say zin en andere. So translated in English, you need a diversity. You can't have a world where you have only $1 million companies and employees. You need an ecosystem of big companies and small companies. So it's not bad to go for control decisions. It's not bad to go for wealth decisions either. Wealth decisions, co-founders, you'll build the team. You'll take the best CFO, the best CTO, and the best CEO, and these guys don't know each other. There was in the Fast 50, there was a Chinese girl who said, I founded a company with somebody I met on the train, and then we went to the airport, and then we met a third guy, and we talked about our idea, and we were the co-founders, and we didn't know each other, but a week later we had a company. And that's a typical wealth decision. You find the best founders, and you delegate decision makers. As the CEO, you leave the financial decisions to your CFO because he's the expert and you trust him with it. You leave the technical decisions to your CTO. You don't interfere. And you share equity. Now, there's a big danger there. If you are 3 co-founders and you say, we are going to split the shares evenly, so 33, 33, 33, you will always have one founder who works his ass off, who works day and night. You will have one founder who works normal hours. And you will have a third founder who sits back and watches the other work. And that's a recipe for disaster. So his advice, Wasserman's advice is, if you start, try to start in an informal way and try to postpone sharing the equity. As for hires, you hire experienced employees. Like Dries Buitaert with Drupal and Acquia, his advice is, I hire ahead of the curve. If I need a marketing guy in 6 months, I hire him now, I train him, I bleed money, but when I need him, in 6 months, he'll be ready. At iText, we hired when it hurt. So we were like 5 people. We had too much work for us 5. We hired an extra person because we needed an extra one. But then we had even more work because we had to train this extra guy. And so before this extra guy started taking away work from us, that really hurted. So that's a result of a control decision. And you'll incent with cash or equity, and you'll delegate decision making. So, for instance, if you hire somebody who is like responsible for buying products, you will give him the authority, a power of authority to sign documents, and you'll trust this guy with these decisions. As for investors, you'll take outside capital, or depending on how much money you need, you'll target angels or VCs, and you'll be open to terms, you'll be open to losing control. As for successors, when you go for wealth decisions, you kind of see, well, in control decisions, a CEO says, well, I was the CEO when we started, then I was the CEO when we made 5 million, and now we're taking the company to the next level. I did well in the first 2 levels, I'll do well in the 3rd level. And that's not always true, because your qualities as a CEO in the first stage of your company, being a CEO in the second stage of your company requires different skills. Being a CEO in the 3rd stage requires other skills. And so maybe it's good that you kind of predict when it's time to step back and when it's time to give up being the CEO. And in the context of wealth decisions, what Wasserman noticed was that people who step back as CEO, they remain an executive because they have all this expertise in the company, and they don't really care that somebody else is in charge now. Other factors is wealth decisions, if you need fast or explosive growth. So I already talked about Showpad. It's a highly competitive market, so they really need to grow fast to not lose the market. Or if you need high capital intensity, so if you need to build something, if you're selling hardware, then you need that start capital. Or so other factors when you choose to go for wealth decisions is if you need to fill gaps. So you have some qualities that you have like 30% of the qualities, and you need to fill out the gaps, that the things that you can't do, the skills that you are missing, then wealth decisions could be the path for you. The most likely income is that you'll build financial value, but you're in parallel control. You'll be in the rich quadrant. That's that quadrant. Now, the question is, why isn't it possible? So isn't it possible to be in the upper right quadrant, where you are king and rich? Well, it's not real math, but Wasserman uses math to explain something. He says it's impossible, if you look at founders, hires, and investors, these are the 3 key decisions. It's impossible to go for 100% control decisions. It's impossible to go for 100% wealth decisions. But for instance, if you go to be king, you take 80% control decisions for founders, 80% for control decisions for hires, 80% for investors, and 20% you go for wealth decisions. Then if you do that consistently, you have a 51% probability that you'll be king and a 1% probability that you'll be rich. And then if you go for being rich and you switch the decisions, it's the other way around. The danger is if you go for something in between. If you mix control decisions and you mix wealth decisions, then, for instance, you say 80% control decisions for founders, 80% for hires, and 20% for investors control decisions, your probability that you'll be king drops from 51% to 13%, but your probability to be rich only increases from 1% to 3%. So if you want to be in that quadrant, you're the exception. Why does everybody know Larry Ellison? Why does everybody know Bill Gates? That's because they are exceptions. If you mix control and wealth decisions, there's a higher chance that you end up in that quadrant, that your business fails. So after reading the book, I tweeted, I finished reading The Founder's Dilemmas. I've made half of the mistakes explained in the book, but I'm looking forward to making the other half. So I realized that with iText we had made all these control decisions, and now the plan for the next 3 years is to slowly change the control decisions into wealth decisions, knowing very well which risks are involved. Now, we had this discussion in the previous talk about what is better? Is it better to have 1% of a billion or 100% of a million? And investors really like to come with this story about the pie. But that's what they want you to see. Now, seen from a VC side, he may have a $1 billion company in his portfolio. But for every company like that in his portfolio, he has a number of companies that are only $10 million companies. And then he has even more that aren't worth anything. Well, maybe the $1,000 in equipment, and that's all the company is worth. So it's very important if you go and work with a VC, it's very important that if you're one of those companies that you realize that very fast, that you don't make the how do you say that, that you don't make a really high investment. If you see that it's going bad, stop and try again. Maybe you'll end up in the 10 million. And if that works out, that's so really think about if you go with the VC, it's a risk you take. Now this is a number from October this year, and for the third straight quarter, there were more than 150 private tech company exits in Europe, and 12% of these tech exits were venture-backed. That means that 88% of the successful exits were not venture-backed. So what I find awkward is that when you read the newspapers, you always read about the companies that get venture capital. You always read about, hey, this company got $8.5 million, but you never hear about the bootstrappers. And so, one more thing, raising money isn't impressive, making money is. So, it has been said in previous talks before, if you have an idea, and you go to a VC, the VC will ask a big share if you only have an ID. First, before going to a VC, try to find some customers. Let your customers be your first investors. And if you have a number of customers and you go to a VC saying, hey, look, I'm not profitable yet, but I'm already making revenue, then you have a much better negotiation position. So that's my take on the founder's dilemmas, and it's a little bit different from the view of the investor, but if you have questions, then I'm here to answer them. Thank you. Okay.
What was the change or decision or thing that changed after which iText really took off and started to make revenue and the growth you had this year?
Different decisions. So it's two parts. First, my initial idea with iText was if I don't ask for any money, I won't have any worries. So I put iText out, free as in free beer, and everybody started using it. Now, no money, no worries was very naive, because before I knew it, I didn't have a life anymore, because everybody was asking technical questions. So I took some vacation, I wrote a free online tutorial, and before I knew it, the free online tutorial was a big success, and I was offered a book contract, so I wrote a book. And after the book, there were not only technical questions, but legal questions. So I did an IP review, and after the IP review, I said, hey, I'm just a person without a company, and if something goes wrong with iText, then I'm personally liable. And so I put the IP into a company, and we started doing business. But business with a product that is free as in free beer is very difficult. We had customers that were really afraid of open source, like banks and insurance companies. But as open source was becoming mainstream, it was more difficult to make money with something that is free as in free beer. So we changed the license from the MPL LGPL, which is a rather liberal license, to the AGPL, which is a viral license. Many people hated me for it, but it was really needed to make revenue to further support the product. For instance, one of the open source competitors is PDFbox. They were at the PDF days last year, and they said, hey, PDF 2.0 is coming, so the new PDF spec, but we don't have any funds to support everything in PDF 2.0, so we're not going to do it. Now that we have revenue, we can go to the ISO meetings, we follow all the new specs, all the new evolutions on PDF, and we are very close to, so before the spec, before the ISO standard is even accepted, we are already ready with iText to support that spec. And so we still had control decisions. So the other change we made is now we are going to go to wealth decisions. And we made a business plan for 3 years. And for instance, the hires, we no longer look in our immediate circle for hires. We took Hudson. Hudson is an international HR consultant. And we said, Hudson, we need these and these and these profiles. And yes, we want you to find the best of breed. So we are paying a lot to Hudson, more than we did when we looked in our own circles. We are paying, so some of the some of the first employees, the company was growing, but the employees weren't growing with the company, so we had to let them go. So one of the key things that so when we made the decision, I had just watched the Startup Secrets by Michael J. Scott. I don't know if you know him. He used to work for Northbridge, a VC in Boston, and he has this series on YouTube, Startup Secrets. And one of the things he said is, no company has ever fired an employee too early. And so that's some of the more difficult decisions. That's a wealth decision. It's a very hard decision, firing an employee for the first time, but sometimes it's necessary. And so that's after seeing the Startup Secrets, and after reading the book, I'm trying to navigate a small control-based company into a company that can grow not only between $5 and $10 million, but that can go beyond the $10 million. Yeah.
How did you bootstrap your company?
So I founded my first company in 2008, and I had a day job until 2010. And so the free online tutorial, it was published in 2004, and I was one of the first people who had Google AdSense ads on his site. And so back in those days, I made like $1,200 a month in AdSense revenue. And then I had the book, so with my first book, I made about $25,000. So using the ads revenue and the revenue from the royalties from my book, I was able to fund my own company, my first company. Yeah?
Yeah, but in the same line, how you manage to, when you want to do a startup, when you have a day job, how you handle time management?
I'm going to say something that will haunt me. I started my job in the private sector as an employee, and then I switched to being a civil servant. And as being a civil servant, you have 35 vacation days a year. So whereas in the private sector you only have 20, and yeah, I've been in the private sector an employee, I've been a civil servant, and I've been an entrepreneur. If you look at price quality, being a civil servant is like the best deal. But if you would ask me, will you ever return to being a civil servant? No, sorry. I like being an entrepreneur more. Okay, sorry. I see that I have to stop.